Today we have a special video on how to winterize your home. I get this question asked a lot. So joining me today is Andy Kolar of American Home Inspections. In fact, that's him at the door. So Andy, tell me, what are some of the general things you recommend that people do when they start prepping their houses in the fall?
I think probably the first thing I would start with is hoses, garden hoses. When the temperature starts getting cold, those hoses need to come off. If they don't, they're gonna hold water in the water pipes, and potentially you're gonna end up with frozen pipes and leaks. So getting those hoses taken off is important. I think it's worth talking about. There are two types of faucets. So there are newer faucets that basically shut themselves off inside the wall and allow some of the water to drain out. There are older faucets that don't. You'll know the difference when you shut the valve off. If the water stops immediately, you've got an older type of faucet. At that point, you're gonna have to go inside the house and turn off a valve. That's usually gonna be in the basement, probably in the ceiling. So you turn that valve off, go back outside, open the hose bib valve, and let that water drain out. If you've got if you've got an older type of faucet, it's probably a good idea to maybe think about putting in a newer type of faucet so you don't have to deal with that every year. But once you get done with your hoses, I would probably move next to gutters.
Okay.
We've just got a lot of leaves
for
coming.
Ice dams and stuff, right?
Well, ice dams could be a little bit related, but we've got leaves coming off the trees, so your gutters are probably full of leaves. Making sure you're getting those cleaned out, getting your downspouts cleared, making sure your extensions are on. That's gonna help, if your gutters are clear, you're gonna have less ice buildup. It's not necessarily always gonna prevent ice dams, but it's a good step to keep the ice from building up, and also make sure when we roll around a spring and we start getting heavy rains, to get that storm water channeled away from the foundation. So the other thing you could think about is potentially putting screens on your gutters. That way, as the leaves fall, hopefully a lot of them shed right off the roof and you don't have to do so much cleaning.
Long term, yeah.
Yep. So after you get done with your gutters, probably walking around the house, we're spending money to heat the house. We'd like to keep that heat in the house. So weather stripping, looking at your doors and windows for any torn or damaged weather stripping. Even your garage doors. Garage doors have a rubber weather seal around them, and making sure that they're in good shape is a good idea. So, and then just if you've got wooden materials outside, that could be anything from trim, siding, decks, landings, stairways. Wood over time is going to be more prone to deterioration and decay. So making sure anything that might be damaged, especially like damaged trim, is getting taken care of and replaced. But then just on a preventative measure, making sure decks get sealed, landings, stairways, those types of things. And then when it comes to your trim and your siding, could be paint, could be stain, but making sure that those surfaces are maintained just to help prevent those type of issues from arising.
Sure.
That's a good idea.
How about servicing your HVAC, or what prep do we need to do to get HVAC and furnaces up to speed for these extreme cold days? Yep.
Well, you want to continue to maintain your furnace throughout the whole year. As far as changing filters, it's good to check your filter every month. Changing a filter at least every 3, I think, is an important idea. But having, fall time is a good time to test run your furnace, turn the thermostat up, make sure it responds, make sure it continues to run. That's one step you can take as a homeowner. But having a professional out to service the equipment is important. It should be done annually, and I think it's a good idea just to get on a service plan.
Yeah.
Yep. Get with somebody that you know or that you trust. They'll remind you every year. Usually, it's something that they'll take care of. One less thing that you have to remember to do. But fireplaces, sometimes if you've got gas fireplaces, I should say, that's equipment that should be serviced too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're having your furnace done, that contractor very likely can take care of your gas fireplace as well.
Good to know. I don't know that I do that. So do you have a smart thermostat? Do you think that's a good idea that people invest in that so they can check when they're gone and stuff?
Yep, I think smart thermostats are good equipment. especially with gas forced air furnaces, getting on a program, the more time you can keep that temperature lower, as far as just energy savings goes, it's going to cost less. You have to be a little careful when it comes to like heat pumps and geothermal equipment. You probably don't want to program that stuff to bounce up and down quite as much. But hey, anytime you can check the temperature in your house from your phone, that's a nice feature as well. Yeah.
How about this myth that people like to, if I'm leaving for vacation, shut all the water off in the house? Is this a good thing or a bad thing, or what's your tip there?
Yeah, I think shutting the water off if you're going to be gone for any amount of time is a good thing to do. One thing you probably want to take into consideration or think about would be like humidifiers. If you have a whole house humidifier and you're going to be gone, and you shut the water off, it's not going to be able to operate. So there are ways to deal with that. Sometimes the water supply line for the humidifier will be tapped in before what is kind of a main valve that shuts everything else off, or that can be done if it's not set up that way. Alternatively, of course, you have valves. Good valves to think about turning off when you're gone for a long time would be like at the water dispenser for the refrigerator, washing machine. You even have valves for all your toilets and underneath your sinks. So depending on how things are configured, those are all options.
You can do individually, yeah.
And I touched on humidifiers, going back to servicing of the HVAC equipment. If you have a whole house humidifier, that's also equipment that needs to be serviced annually. So there's kind of three main points there. There's evaporator panel, which is kind of like your furnace filter, but in the humidifier, that's something that should be replaced every year. If it's a bypass humidifier, which is the most common type, there's a damper usually between the supply and the return. So in the summertime when you're not using it, that gets closed. It prevents air from moving through the humidifier.
Right.
When you're going to use it in the heating season, of course that needs to be opened
Manually
up.
need to turn it back on.
And then setting your humidistat. Normally that's going to be off when you're not using it. You need to set that appropriately once you're ready to use the humidifier. And it's worth mentioning, you don't want to over humidify the house. So using a hygrometer to keep an eye on the relative humidity in the house is a good way to keep an eye on that. Your humidistat's not going to be 100% foolproof. Also, there's times when we have super cold temperatures. I mean, we've extended 0-degree days or even into the negative temperatures. And if you see that in the forecast, you might want to get ahead of it and maybe turn your humidistat down a little bit, or even sometimes off if we know we're going to be having a really long or a prolonged cold snap. If you're seeing condensation on your windows or anywhere else in the house, it's a sign that you're probably over humidifying things.
Oh, good to know. So condensation in the windows, good. Probably need to go turn the humidity down.
Turn that down.
Okay.
Yep.
I know a lot of people forget to turn the humidifier on, or a lot of new construction sometimes doesn't include it. And it's really important to keep like gaps in flooring and trim. And so it's a good idea to get one installed, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if we have these extreme cold days, and it seems like our winters have become colder when it's actually cold out, what are some tips for like holding heat inside, or what can people do?
Well, again, going back to the weather stripping, I think that's a good point that we made earlier. So checking to make sure all those seals are intact. There's penetrations that go through the exterior wall, air conditioning refrigerant lines, furnace vents, hose bibs, all kinds of things. Checking all those penetrations to see hopefully they were sealed to start with.
Right.
If they weren't, getting them sealed, but if those sealants are still intact or in good shape, so just to help prevent that air infiltration, through the outside walls. Other than that, there's other small things you can do with drapes and curtains and blinds.
So closing the blinds and the drapes actually helps keep the warm air in.
Yeah, it's kind of like
Extra layer.
One layer of insulation. Yep, you bet. So
good. Well, this is really helpful information, Andy. Thanks for meeting us today. You do a great job in inspections, so appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Andy.